Hey guys, welcome to yet another amazing video of the Helm series from your one and only DevOps Pro channel. Today we will discuss about using blocks in Helm templates. Since the topic is completely practical, let's skip the theory and move on to understanding it visually inside Visual Studio Code. Once again, we have a chart named Web App in our possession, in which we have only one deployment file in the templates. In this deployment file, we are creating a deployment named WebApp deployment with a replica count of 1, and inside its container image, we are using the Nginx 1.19 image. Inside the container section, we have also opened two ports, 80 and 8080. So, this is our deployment file, but all the values here are currently hard-coded. Firstly, to pass them dynamically, let's set variables for these values inside the .yml file. And since we are going to pass all the things related to deployment, let's first create a field for deployment. Inside this field, we can pass all the deployment-related fields. Firstly, we will add name inside it so that we can set the deployment name. We pass Web App deployment inside it. Next, we will pass the replica in which we will provide our replica count. And now it's time to pass the image. In the image, we have two things, an image and a tag of that image. To dynamically change the image name or tag whenever we want, we create another field for the image here. And inside that, we create a repository which we set to Nginx. Additionally, we create a tag where we pass 1.19. In the container section, we are also passing the ports where we have passed two port numbers, port 80 and port 8080. To be able to dynamically edit the port numbers, we create another field inside this deployment named ports where we pass port 1 and port 2. And we will set the value of one to 80 and the other to 8080. So, in order to dynamically provide the values for the values that were hard-coded inside our deployment file, we have written them in a values file. Just like how we have set all the values in the values file. We have directly specified the name and replica inside the deployment. For the image value, we have provided them inside the repository and tag. And in the ports sections, we have created port 1 and port 2. It is not mandatory to keep all these things in this way, you can write them in the values file in any way you like. But when we work in the real world, we should keep things in a very systematic way so that anyone who reads this code or values file can understand all the things, which value will go where. So keeping that in mind, we have passed our values in the fields in this way. In our values file, we have set the values. Now it's time to template our deployment file so that we can dynamically include these values in the deployment file. First of all, we write at the deployment nameplace inside double curly brackets. .values.deployment.name. Here we also pass the same values within the labels. To fetch the image inside the container section, we will write within double curly brackets values.deployment.image.repository, values.deployment.image.tag. This way our container image will be fetched. Now, we will write in the ports section. Write.values.deployment.ports.ports1 inside double curly brackets and below, repeat the same and here replace port 1 with port 2. I hope you have no doubts till now, because we have made many videos on Helm and have seen how we pick values from the values file in any file. So there shouldn't be any issue till here. If we run it now, all our values will come here correctly. Just as we expect it to work, it will work. But there is a problem here. If you look in this file, you see that .values.deployment has repeated so many times. We have to write it repeatedly to fetch our values. Right now our file is quite small, and we are creating only one deployment in this chart. But when we work in the real world, we have multiple files, so in such cases if we repeat the same lines, it becomes difficult to read the code. So, for the lines that are repeatedly getting repeated in the file, we can write them only once or define them once and then repeatedly use them by using with blocks in Helm templates or in our YML files. Since .values.deployment is appearing frequently in the entire file, we will put this entire deployment file in a with block. We define the with block inside double curly brackets, and we write the field that is repeating here after it. In our case, we will have with followed by .values.deployment here. And as we have opened a with block, we will place an end block at the end here. And as we already know that when this template file is rendered, all our statements like if-else statement or with statement are executed, and in the end, spaces are left in place of these in the YAML file. To remove white spaces, we can add a hyphen after the curly bracket. And as we have set a with statement where we are setting the scope for .values.deployment for this file. So wherever you see .values.deployment, you can remove them from there. Because the scope of our file has already been set to .values.deployment. So, from now on, any values dynamically picked by us will automatically be considered in front of helm.values.deployment. Therefore, we can remove .values.deployment from everywhere. Now, it is possible that many people may not understand why we did this and how it will automatically utilize .values.deployment. So, if you have ever noticed that when we dynamically pick any value, we write and then values because we want to fetch its value from the values file. The dots we write at the beginning represent our root level scope. Therefore, before capturing all things, we write a dot, and then the values in the file in the way we have specified the variables, we use them in that way. For example, in this case, if we look at it through a flowchart, after the root level, we have our deployment, and within that, we can create 4 branches to see the hierarchy of values, where our first branch will be the first name because it is inside the deployment. If we were to use it, we would access it through .values.deployment.name, so that's why the name will be inside our deployment, and the second will be replica, third image, and fourth ports. Within the image, 2 branches will be created again, one for repository and the other for tag. In ports, we can also create 2 branches, one for port 1 and the other for port 2. So, this is the complete hierarchy looking at our values file, and here we can clearly see each path from the root level on how we can access any value. So by default, the scope is set to root. And as we don't want to repeat .values.deployment, we are setting the scope for this file to root by removing it from here. So any upcoming items that you are specifying here will be assumed to have .values.deployment automatically. If you look at the image field inside the container section, even the .image is being repeated twice. So, only for this image section, we use another with statement and set the scope to .image for this image field. It means that Helm will automatically consider the value of deployment .image for this image field. And we can remove the .image from here. Do not forget to add the end statement right after the image part. Similarly, for the section below the ports, we can create another with statement so that we do not repeat .ports. You can add a with statement above the ports and write .ports there. By writing this, you can remove .ports from the ports of the containers, and finally we will end the with statement again. This final file has been made in a way where we have removed many repetitive lines and changed the scope with the statement. Now, if you save the file and run the helm install command, when you see the generated file, you will observe that all our values are placed correctly in the right places. This means that our with statement is working correctly. Now, let's make a small change here. Inside the containers, there is a name whose value we have hard-coded in the web app deployment. For this, we create another field outside the deployment in the values file for the container. And in that, we provide the name of this container. Now, if we want to include this value in our name field, we will write .values.container.name. But if you run the file this time, you will encounter an error of nil pointer evaluating the interface. This means Helm is not able to fetch the value of helm.values.container.name. Because we have already removed the root scope for this file and set .values.deployment. So, it cannot access any values outside of the deployment. In such a scenario, if you want to utilize root levels again and maintain the with statement as it is, you can use a $sign before .values here. Helm will understand from the $sign to start searching from the root to access this value. Then, it will find the container field inside the root which contains the name field. Now, if you save the file and run it, Helm will be able to access the field Helm container name without any errors this time. In this way, you can use the with statement and can change its scope anywhere by removing it from the root. And as much as possible, you can avoid repetitive lines. You can use the $sign to access the root level again. So, today we saved our code from duplicate lines by defining the with statement in this way. You may not have understood this use case only in the deployment file. But when you use Helm charts in the real world, you will often come across with statements there. Therefore, it is very important to understand all the concepts. So, that was our today's topic on the with statement in Helm chart. If you have any doubts anywhere, let us know in the comment section. Watch the video again and make sure to understand the concept well and learn it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share it with your friends. Thank you.